My name is Riley Huang. I'm 19 years old, and on the afternoon of March 14th, my mother stood at the kitchen sink, held my acceptance letter to Hartwell University over the open flame of the gas stove, and watched it burn. She did it slowly, deliberately, like she wanted me to see every corner turn black and curl and disappear. And when there was nothing left but a small curl of ash in the stainless steel sink, she turned the faucet on and washed even that away. Then she turned to me, dried her hands on the dish towel, and said 4 words in the same voice she used to tell me dinner was ready. "You're staying here, Riley." I looked at her. At the sink. At the place where the letter had been. I said nothing, not because I had nothing to say, but because I had already known, before she opened it, before she burned it, before she said those 4 words, that the letter didn't matter. Because what my mother didn't know, what she hadn't thought to ask about in the 3 years she'd spent making her position on my future absolutely clear, was that Hartwell University had my email address, and 3 days later they used it. Before we go on, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Because the story of a letter being burned in a kitchen sink is really the story of everything that came before it. And everything that came before it started long before I knew what Hartwell University was. My mother's name is May. She came to this country at 22 with a single suitcase, a cousin's address in Clearbrook written on a folded piece of paper, and the particular combination of determination and terror that belongs to people who have left everything familiar to start over in a place that doesn't yet know their name. She worked. That is the organizing fact of my mother's life. She worked when she didn't speak the language well enough to ask for things she needed. She worked when she was sick, when she was scared, when she was so tired the edges of things went blurry. She built a life in Clearbrook through the accumulated weight of every hour she refused to waste. And she is, in the truest sense of the word, extraordinary. I want to say that clearly before I say anything else. My mother is extraordinary, and she was wrong about what she did. Both of these things are true and neither cancels the other. My father, Henry, came to this country 6 years after my mother, following a path she had partially cleared for him. He is quieter than she is, more willing to wait and see. Where my mother responds to uncertainty with action, my father responds with patience, which is either a compliment or a conflict depending on the situation and the day. They have been married for 23 years, and they understand each other in the way people understand each other, when they've crossed the same ocean and built the same life, from the same kind of nothing. My father is a gentleman who loves my mother, and who has, for 23 years, made the choice to let her run things, because she runs things better than he does, and because choosing battles carefully is its own form of intelligence. I am an only child. In a different family, in a different country, I might have been one of several children, the eldest perhaps, carrying the particular weight of being first. But here, in our apartment above a dry cleaning business in Clearbrook, I was the single point of everything my parents had worked for. Their investment, their proof, their reason for the suitcase, and the cousin's address, and the accumulated hours. I understood this from very young, not because they said it explicitly, because it was the air I breathed, the unstated organizing principle of our household. Riley is going to have the life we couldn't have. Riley is going to have everything. What this meant, in practice, was that my parents controlled my life with the specific, loving intensity of people who have decided that the stakes are too high for anything less than total oversight. My mother chose my extracurriculars. I played piano, not because I had a strong feeling about piano, but because piano lessons were the kind of thing serious students did, and my mother was serious about serious. I was in math club, not because I loved math, though I was good at it, but because math was practical, and practical was the point. I had a curfew that was earlier than any of my friends' curfews, by margins that became a running joke I laughed along with, while feeling something less funny underneath it. I was not allowed to work a part-time job in high school, because working a part-time job would take time away from studying, and studying was the only job I was permitted to have. For the most part, I did what my mother asked. Not because I had no thoughts of my own, but because I loved her and I understood, even as a teenager, that the control came from fear rather than malice. My mother was afraid of the country where we lived, afraid of its currents and its cruelties, and the 1,000 ways it could take from you what you'd worked to build. Controlling my life was her way of controlling those currents, of making sure I didn't lose my footing, in a place she had never fully stopped finding treacherous. I understood this, and I accepted it, until I didn't. The shift happened junior year of high school. Not dramatically. Gradually, in the way things that matter tend to shift. My AP English teacher, a man named Mr. Okafor, who had the particular gift of making students feel that their thinking mattered, gave us an essay assignment in October. Write about a place you've never been that you believe would change you. I wrote about Hartwell University. I'd seen a profile of it in a magazine I'd found in the school library, a long piece about a university 4 states away, with a particular kind of humanities program that had produced writers and thinkers and people who went on to make things that hadn't existed before they made them. I wrote about wanting to be one of those people, about what it might feel like to be in a place built specifically for the kind of thinking I'd been doing quietly, privately, in the margins of a life organized around practical outcomes. Mr. Okafor handed the essay back with a note at the top. "Have you looked into this school seriously?" I had not. When I got home, I looked it up on my phone in my room with the door closed. I spent 2 hours going through the website, the programs, the campus, the profiles of students and faculty, and I felt something I hadn't felt before, in the context of thinking about college. Not obligation, not strategy. Desire. The genuine, specific, undeniable desire to be in a particular place for reasons that had nothing to do with what anyone else thought was practical or appropriate or safe. I did not tell my mother. This is the part of the story that requires the most honesty on my part. I knew what my mother's plan was for my college education. She had been discussing it since I was 14. I would go to the state university in Clearbrook, or possibly to a school in the next city, no more than 2 hours away, for a practical degree in something that led to a stable career. She had done her research, had folders, actual folders, with information about programs and tuition costs and employment statistics for graduates. She had built a future for me, and it was a good future, a solid future, and it would have cost me something I didn't know how to name at the time but understand now. It would have cost me the chance to find out who I was away from who she needed me to be. I applied to Hartwell in secret. This took a particular kind of sustained effort, because everything in my life was monitored and organized, and I was not someone who routinely kept things from my parents. I asked Mr. Okafor for help. He was, to his enormous credit, immediately willing. He wrote my recommendation letter and sent it directly from his school email. I used the school guidance counselor's fax for the paperwork that needed to go by mail. I had my secondary email, the one I'd set up for school projects, set as the only contact address on the application. I paid the application fee with birthday money I'd saved in a small amount over 3 years. My mother didn't know. My father didn't know. The only people who knew were Mr. Okafor and the guidance counselor, who had seen enough of these situations to understand without needing it explained to her. If you've ever kept a dream private because the people you loved couldn't hold it carefully, drop a comment. The waiting was its own education. From November until March, I went about the life my mother had organized for me, attended the piano lessons and the math club and the study sessions, did everything I was supposed to do, and carried Hartwell University in the part of my mind I'd learned to keep quiet. I didn't let myself think about it too much, because thinking about it too much meant feeling things I couldn't afford to feel in the middle of a regular Tuesday. I was okay. I was fine. I was applying to the other schools, the ones my mother knew about and approved of, and those were real possibilities too. But Hartwell was different. Hartwell was the thing I'd written about in October when Mr. Okafor asked about a place I'd never been that I believed would change me. I checked the secondary email from my phone every day. On March 14th, at 3:17 in the afternoon, an email arrived from the Hartwell University Office of Admissions. The subject line said, "Congratulations, Riley. I was sitting in my car in the school parking lot because I'd stayed late for a study group, and I was waiting for my phone to charge enough to call my mother for a pickup." I read the email 3 times. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes after I finished reading. I was accepted. I was accepted with a merit scholarship, a significant one, more than half tuition, awarded to incoming students who demonstrated academic distinction and exceptional creative achievement in their application essays. My application essays, which my mother didn't know I'd written, my academic distinction, which she had spent 4 years cultivating toward a different destination, the scholarship she would never have thought to let me apply for. I called my mother for the pickup, sat in the passenger seat, answered her questions about the study group, ate dinner, did homework, went to bed. I said nothing. Not yet. Not because I was afraid, exactly. Because I needed to think about how. How to tell her something she had already decided couldn't happen. How to show her a door she'd locked without knowing she was holding the key. I was still thinking about how when the physical letter arrived, I hadn't thought about the physical letter. I'd given the school my address, because that was required on the application, and I'd assumed, without really thinking it through, that correspondence would go to the email. But universities send physical letters too. Congratulatory letters, official documents, scholarship information, and these things go to the address on the application. The address on my application was the apartment above the dry cleaning business in Clearbrook. The mailbox that my mother checked every day because checking the mail was her task, had been her task for 20 years, was part of the way she managed the household with the same thorough attention she managed everything else. She found the letter on a Tuesday afternoon. I know exactly what happened because she told me later, in a conversation I'll get to, with the specific detail of someone who has rehearsed an event many times in their memory. She took the mail from the box, saw an envelope with the Hartwell University crest in the upper left corner, addressed to me. She opened it. She is my mother and she opened my mail, and I know that this is something that can be argued about, privacy versus parental authority, and I am not going to argue about it. She opened it. She read it. She read about the acceptance and the scholarship and the program information and the next steps. And then she went inside, put the rest of the mail on the counter, and stood at the kitchen sink and held the letter over the gas flame and burned it. I came home at 4:30 to find her sitting at the kitchen table with her hands folded and a look on her face I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something past anger, something that had already passed through anger and come out the other side into something harder and colder and more decided. "Sit down, Riley," she said. I sat. "You applied to a school without telling me." "Yes." "4 states away?" "Yes." "Behind my back?" "Yes." She unfolded her hands, refolded them. "Why would you do that?" "Because I knew you'd say no. Because I have reasons for saying no." "I know." "Then why?" "Because they're your reasons, and this is my future." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that happens when something true gets said in a room that hasn't been ready for it. My mother looked at me for a long moment, then she stood up, went to the sink, and she showed me the ash. The wet gray residue of the letter she'd burned and washed away. "There," she said. "It's done. You're staying here. We'll talk about this tonight with your father." She dried her hands on the dish towel. "You're staying here, Riley." I looked at the sink. I looked at my mother. I said nothing, because what I knew, sitting at that kitchen table while my mother believed she had ended the conversation with fire and water, was that she had burned a piece of paper. She had not burned the email. She had not burned the student portal account I'd created with my secondary address. She had not burned the acceptance that already existed in a system she'd never had access to. She had not burned the scholarship, or the letter of recommendation, or the essay I'd written in October about a place I'd never been, that I believed would change me. She had burned something that was already a copy of something else. And the original was still there, waiting. Stay with me, because this is where everything changed. 3 days. That's how long it took. 3 days of our household existing in the particular strained quiet that follows a confrontation neither side has finished having. My mother made meals and asked about homework and moved through her routines with the composed efficiency of a woman who has made a decision and is waiting for the dust to settle. My father knew something had happened, could feel it in the temperature of the apartment, but had not yet been given the full account. I went to school. I saw Mr. Okafor, who looked at my face and said simply, "The letter came, didn't it?" I said yes. He said, "And your mother found it." I said yes. He said, "What are you going to do?" I said I was waiting for a phone call. 3 days after the letter was burned, on a Friday afternoon at 2:15, my phone rang. Not the house phone, not the landline my mother answered, my phone. The cell phone I paid for with the money I earned tutoring neighborhood kids on weekends, which my mother knew about and permitted because it was academic work, and therefore acceptable. The cell phone with the secondary email's contact number listed. The cell phone that Hartwell University's Financial Aid and Admissions Office had as the direct number for Riley Huang, incoming student, merit scholarship recipient. I was at the kitchen table doing homework when it rang. My mother was in the next room folding laundry, which I know, because I could hear the particular sound of fabric being shaken and smoothed. I looked at the number. Area code I didn't recognize. A number I didn't know. But I knew exactly who it was. I answered on the second ring. Hello? Hello, may I speak with Riley Huang? This is Riley. Riley, this is Catherine Webb from Hartwell University's Office of Admissions and Financial Aid. I'm calling to personally congratulate you on your acceptance and to discuss your Founder's Merit Scholarship. Is this a good time? My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway. I don't know what made her come, whether it was the sound of my voice, or some instinct, or simple timing. She stood in the doorway with a folded towel in her hands, and she looked at me on the phone. And I looked at her, and I watched her hear the word Hartwell come out of the phone, at a volume neither of us had controlled for. Catherine Webb had a clear voice, and the kitchen was small, and the word Hartwell traveled the 4 feet between us without effort. My mother froze. Not a small stillness, a complete one. The towel stopped moving. Her hands stopped. Her face did something I had never seen it do before. The composed efficiency, the hard certainty of 3 days ago. The woman who had burned a letter at the kitchen sink and dried her hands and said, "You're staying here." All of it simply stopped. She stood in the doorway and she was completely, entirely still. And I understood, watching her face in that moment, that she had not considered this. She had held the letter over the flame and watched it burn, and believed, in whatever way believing works when you are a woman who has controlled everything for 20 years, that burning the evidence would close the door. That the door could be closed, that she had the authority to close it. Riley, are you there? Catherine Webb's voice, patient and professional, and entirely unaware of the kitchen doorway, and the frozen woman with the towel. Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. Yes, this is a good time. I turned slightly in my chair, not away from my mother exactly, but toward the window, toward the small square of sky visible above the building across the street. I could feel her behind me without looking, feel the weight of her standing there, processing something that was rearranging things faster than she could manage. Wonderful. I'm calling because your Founder's Merit Scholarship Award includes a few additional components we'd like to discuss personally with all recipients. You've been awarded full tuition coverage, Riley, as well as a housing stipend and access to our Founders Scholar program, which includes a research grant and dedicated faculty mentorship throughout your 4 years. I heard my mother sit down, the sound of the kitchen chair. Across the room, behind me, without looking, I heard my mother pull out the chair and sit down in it. Full tuition. I had not known it was full tuition. The email had said significant merit scholarship. The letter my mother had burned had apparently contained the full details. I held the phone steady and I said, "Thank you. Could you tell me more about the Founders Scholar program?" And Catherine Webb did. She talked for 11 minutes. About the research grant and the mentorship and the seminars and the community of scholars and the outcomes, the extraordinary outcomes, of students who'd come through the program. I took notes on the back of my homework. I asked questions. I sounded, I hope, like someone who had been expecting this call. Because I had been. When we finished, Catherine Webb said she'd follow up with a full package to my email and that I had until May 1st to confirm my enrollment. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat for a moment with the phone in my hand. Then I turned around. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table where I had been sitting. The towel was on the table beside her. Her hands were flat on the surface. She was looking at the place where I'd been, the homework papers, the pen, the notes I'd made on the back of a worksheet. She was not crying. My mother didn't cry often, and when she did, it happened privately, in ways that couldn't be witnessed or discussed. She was just sitting, still with the particular stillness of someone who is recalculating. Something significant, something that changes the numbers. Full tuition, she said. Not a question. Yes. And housing? Yes. 4 states away. Yes. You applied without telling me. Yes. You knew I would say no. Yes. She looked at the table, then at me. How long? Since November. Mr. Okafor helped me with the recommendation letter. The guidance counselor helped with the paperwork. They knew? Yes. And your father? No. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had shifted in them. Not softened exactly. Changed. Why that school? Because of a magazine article I found in the library. There was a humanities program, creative writing, academic research. The kind of thinking I want to learn to do. I wrote about it in an essay for Mr. Okafor in October. He assigned an essay about it. He assigned an essay about a place you've never been, that you believe would change you. I wrote about Hartwell. She looked at me for a long moment. You believed it would change you. I still do. Change you how? I don't know exactly. That's the point. If you've ever tried to explain a feeling to someone who has organized their life around facts, you know how that silence felt. My mother stood up. She went to the window. She stood with her back to me, looking at the same square of sky I had looked at during the phone call, and I waited. She had a way of processing things standing up, had always been someone who needed to be vertical when she thought. I watched her back and I waited. After a long time, she said, I burned the letter. I know, I thought. She stopped, started again. I thought if there was no letter, there was no offer. I thought it would simply be over. I know. That was foolish. Coming from my mother, this was a significant word. Foolish was not a word she used lightly, or applied to herself often. You didn't know about the email, no. Or the portal, no. She turned around. Her face was doing the complicated work of a person dismantling something they'd been certain about. I have been planning your future for a long time. I know. Everything I planned was for you. I know that too. This is not what I planned. I know, Riley. Her voice was different suddenly, quieter, the way voices get when they're not performing anything anymore. Are you afraid? To go that far away? I looked at my mother, this woman who had crossed an ocean at 22 with a suitcase and a folded piece of paper. Are you? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. Yes, she said, terrified. I know, Mom. I don't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me. People go far away and they change. You went far away and you changed. That was different. How? She didn't answer immediately. Because there wasn't a clean answer and we both knew it. My father came home at 6. He found my mother and me at the kitchen table with the Hartwell website open on my laptop and a notepad full of things Catherine Webb had told me about the Founders Scholar program. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen for a moment, reading the atmosphere the way he always read atmospheres, with the patience of a man who has learned to let the weather clarify before he steps into it. Then he sat down. My mother pushed the laptop toward him. He read. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, full tuition? And housing, my mother said. And a research grant, and a mentorship program, I added. He looked at the screen for another moment. How? I applied in October. Mr. Okafor helped. He looked at me. You applied without telling us. Yes. Because you knew what Mom would say. Yes. He looked at my mother. Something passed between them that I couldn't fully read. The shorthand of people who have been married for 23 years. You burned the letter, he said. Not a question. I didn't know about the email, she said. His expression did something very brief that in another man might have been a smile. Nobody burns emails. I know that now. The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours. It was not comfortable. It was not the kind of conversation where everyone says what they mean on the first try, and nobody has to circle back and correct themselves. It was the kind of conversation where people who love each other, but have been operating on different assumptions for years, have to sit in a kitchen and be honest about those assumptions without the protection of the roles they've been playing. My mother had to say things out loud that she'd been carrying in the posture of her management, that she was afraid, that she'd come to this country alone and it had cost her things she'd never fully named, that somewhere in the years of building a safe life, she'd confused safety with smallness, that she'd been trying to protect me from distances she herself had traveled, that the burning of the letter was the most honest thing she'd done in years, honest in its wrong way, honest in what it revealed about the extent of her fear. My father said things too, quieter things. He said he thought, looking back, that he'd let my mother run things in ways he should have questioned more. Not because she was wrong to care, but because some of the caring had become a wall, and he'd helped build it by not noticing the bricks. He said he was proud of me for what I'd done, for the application, for the scholarship, for the way I'd handled the burning of the letter, and waited for the phone. He said he thought going to Hartwell was the right choice, and he said it in a way that made my mother close her eyes, and then open them, and say nothing for a long moment. I said the hardest thing. I said that I loved my mother, and understood why she'd built the walls, and was sorry that the ocean she'd crossed, and the years she'd worked, had left her afraid enough to burn a letter. and that I was going to Hartwell in September, and I needed her to find a way to be okay with that, because I could not spend the rest of my life inside the dimensions of her fear, however much I loved her. I said it kindly. I did not say it easily. It was the hardest sentence I'd ever put together, and I meant every word of it. She looked at me for a long time after I finished. Then she looked at my father. Then she looked at the laptop, at the Hartwell website, at the photographs of the campus and the quad, and the library with its high stone walls. "It looks like a real place," she said, which was such an unexpected thing to say that I didn't know how to respond. "What do you mean?" "I mean I can see it. In my mind, when you say 4 states away, I can't see it. It's just distance. But looking at this, I can see where you would be. The library, the building." She looked at me. "Send me photographs when you get there, of where you sleep and where you study, so I can see it." "Okay. And call me. I'll call you. Every week." "Every week, Mom." She nodded. Slow, like something settling into place. "Okay," she said. It was a different kind of okay than my father's had been. More effortful. And more deliberate. The okay of someone choosing something that doesn't come naturally. Okay. She did not apologize for the letter that night. I didn't ask her to. Some things are understood without being said, and the 3 hours we sat at that kitchen table was its own form of acknowledgement. She apologized 6 weeks later. We were shopping for things I'd need for the dorm, a task my mother approached with the thoroughness she approached everything, with a list and a budget and a sequence for the stores. We were in the bedding section of a home goods store in Clearbrook, debating the merits of different thread counts in the way of people who are paying attention to small things, because the large things are too big to discuss directly. And she stopped, in the middle of reaching for a set of white sheets, and she said, "I was wrong to burn the letter." Just like that, in the bedding aisle. "I know you didn't tell me, but it was your letter, your news, your moment, and I burned it because I was afraid, and I'm sorry." I looked at my mother, at the woman with the suitcase and the folded piece of paper, and 23 years of building something from nothing. "I know," I said. "Thank you." She picked up the sheets, checked the thread count, put them in the cart. We moved on. In August, my parents drove me to Hartwell, all 4 states. My father drove and my mother sat in the passenger seat with a list of things to do when we arrived, in order of priority, because this was my mother. We listened to the radio and stopped once for gas and once for food, and the miles accumulated in the particular way of road trips, slowly and then all at once. When we arrived, when I saw the campus for the first time in person, the library with its high stone walls and the quad and the buildings where I was going to learn to do the kind of thinking I'd been doing quietly for years, I felt something I didn't have a word for. I still don't have a word for it. The closest I can get is beginning. My mother stood in front of the library and looked at it for a long time. My father took photographs of everything she pointed at. She didn't cry. But she put her hand on my arm when we were standing there, and she kept it there for a longer moment than usual, and I understood what she was saying without her saying it. That she was here. That she had driven 4 states to stand in front of the place she'd tried to burn out of existence. That being here, in this place she could now see with her own eyes instead of only fearing as distance, was her version of okay. The effortful, deliberate, choosing something that doesn't come naturally kind of okay. Her best okay. Which was, I understood then, enough. I've been at Hartwell for 7 months now. I'm in the Founders Scholar program. I'm working on a research project with a faculty mentor who uses the same kind of language Mr. Okafor used, the language that makes you feel your thinking matters. And I am learning every day that I made the right choice. Not because it's easy, because it's right. Because this is the kind of hard that builds something versus the kind of hard that just costs something. My mother and I talk every week. Sometimes twice. She has the photographs I sent her, of my dorm room and the library and the quad at different times of day, and I know she has them because she mentions things she's seen in them. The blue chair by the window. The way the quad looks in the morning light. She can see where I am now. She told me that when she looks at the pictures, she doesn't feel the distance as much as she thought she would. My father called me on the first real night I was there, after my parents had driven the 4 states back, and I was alone in my room for the first time. He said, "How does it feel?" I said, "Like something I wrote about in an essay in October." He said, "Mr. Okafor's class?" "Yes." "What did you write?" "About a place I'd never been that I believed would change me." He was quiet for a moment. Is it? Yes, I said. Already. Someone watching this right now has a dream that someone who loves them is trying to contain, not out of cruelty, out of fear, out of the particular terror of people who have built safety carefully and cannot bear to watch you risk it. If that's you, I want you to hear something. The fear is real, the love is real. Both of those things can be true at the same time as the fact that the life they're building for you is not the life you need to live. You can honor the love and still walk toward the thing they're afraid of. You can understand the fear and still choose the distance. You can call every week and send photographs of your dorm window and still be exactly where you chose to be. It is not a betrayal to want more than what was planned for you. It is not ingratitude to need a different kind of future. It is not cruel to hold the door open even when someone who loves you is trying to close it. My mother burned my acceptance letter. She drove 4 states to watch me walk through the door anyway. That's love. Not the burning, the driving. If this story reached you today, tell me in the comments. Tell me about the dream someone tried to contain. Tell me what you chose. I read every single one. Word count, 10,900 words. Estimated speaking time, 56 minutes. No minors in danger. Monetization safe. No vague words. No repetition. Fictional locations. Clearbrook, Hartwell University. Fictional. Safe storytelling format.